Hi, this is Sagar here. Um, I am the co-founder of EduPet, and what we want to do through EduPet is we want to bring knowledge and information which is not very easily available to pet parents to most pet parents or to as many pet parents as possible, so that we bring a different perspective onto the table. Until today, we all thought that there are only two ways to feed a dog. One is kibble and one is cooked food. Now we have Devisri Sarkar here, who is going to show us a third option, which is raw feeding. Some of us already know about raw feeding. We know some things about raw feeding. We've heard some good things. We've heard some bad things. So Devasri is here to correct to tell us which are the truths and which are the myths about raw feeding. She's been doing this for the last 18 years, and she currently has a 18-year-old dog who has been raw fed. So that kind of from what we've learned, like, dogs at 10 years are called senior dogs. That is no longer the case. We have dogs at 18, which is technically two lifetimes, according to what the general beliefs are. So I'll hand over the mic to Devasri, and hopefully, whatever she tells us, let us take it. Um, let us try to take it with an open mind. Ask as many questions as you can, because the only way you can be convinced about something is by asking questions and getting the answers. And yes, Devasri, could you please introduce yourself and let us begin?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody who's joined in. Thank you so much for joining in because it tells me that these many people are actually curious about this as a raw feeding as a dietary option. And not only are you pet parents, most probably, you're also people who are professionals in the field and are doing little things around your world to make a difference to a larger population of dogs than just your own dogs directly. And that is something that really makes me feel very energized to try and see if I can convince you guys who already know some amount of have some amount of knowledge in feeding and nutrition for our pet animals. I don't know, is this just dogs or do we have people with cats as well and we're looking at feline nutrition also? Sagar?
Tushar has cats.
I have a cat in there
Yeah.
already on raw.
Okay,
Hi,
lovely.
Devisri, it's Mitali.
Hey, Mitali. Oh my
Hi.
goodness.
I
Somebody I
know.
know. All right.
Yes.
Okay,
I saw your
fantastic.
name. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this.
All right. Great. So, for those who don't know me, and I've always kept a pretty low profile on social media because I think the work that I do is very on the job and hands on. I'm pretty bad at social media. I'm not so good with all of those things. So, for a very long period of time, everything that I'd experienced would be limited to answering people's questions on social media. But thanks to Sagar, I've decided to take a plunge and see if I can reach out to more people. Because, from a physical perspective, as many people as I could have reached over the last 18 years, I've managed to do. And I think it's now time to take that step forward and go a little larger to a larger population because I think the raw feeding world in India is improving. I am beginning to see nutritionists, even though they've done their nutrition courses, which do not talk much about raw, they have started looking at raw as an option. And now it is important for us to know the science of raw, to know, to ensure that we have all our doubts around raw coming from a slightly more educated standpoint as pet parents, to ensure that we know we can ask the right questions and not just look at a formula that somebody gives you without knowing the background behind the formula. So I was having this conversation with Sagar before where I was saying my basic aim is to ensure that each pet parent that is interacting with a professional, be it a nutritionist, be it a veterinarian, be it a behaviorist, be it a trainer, they need to have at least some basic idea of some of the terminologies that somebody says and not just blindly follow it, because the best advocate for your own dog is yourself. Your own dog or cat is yourself. You are the one who is putting the history in front of that behaviorist, in front of that trainer, in front of that veterinarian. They have the background knowledge, but they're picking up the information around your specific dog from yourself. So if you do not know how to watch for your dog and team up with the nutritionists, with the veterinarians, with the trainers, you will never do the right thing for your dog if you're just blindly following what someone's saying. So EduPet synchronized with my mindset simply because I noticed that Sagar was doing something similar, that is trying to bring that information down to the grassroots level. That is the pet parent who is probably the best advocate of their pets. So, once again, hi, I'm Devisri. I've been doing this for about 18 years. I started off just as a pet parent, like a lot of you would. It has been a journey for me because my dogs that I took on, maybe because I was very passionate about dogs, I would take on the dogs with problems. So I had a golden retriever that was super aggressive because he had hip dysplasia, and that was close to 20 years ago, when hip dysplasia surgery was theoretically available but not available in India at that point of time. So at that point of time, I met with a vet who said, "Hey, if you're willing to do it, I'll do it. I'll help you get the HD surgery done." So my dog was probably the second dog in Bangalore. I don't know about all India, but the second dog in Bangalore that actually got the FHO surgery done. So I've had to learn a lot just for the well-being of my animals, because I brought in dogs that had some genetic diseases, that had behavioral problems, that had issues. And as I started working on those issues, I ended up educating myself. So I've got multiple certifications, and all those certifications took me step by step in a certain goal. So today, I would call myself a holistic practitioner, because not only have I done work on canine behavior, I started off with training, moved on into canine behavior, and then moved into ethology of dogs. From there, I moved into nutrition. Then I moved into pain management. I moved into myotherapy. I moved into stress management, and I have all those certifications. And over a period of time, I have learned to provide the pet parents that I work with and my dogs a more holistic view. I started off with the urban dog, which is a canine behavior counseling space. I do most of my canine behavior work and nutrition work and all of that through that over the last 12 to 14 years. And then very recently I've started off with my dream project, which is called the Central Park, which is actually a sensory garden for dogs. Trying to work on the psyche of the dog, or the cognitive skills of the dog, or the urban dog, the dog that lives in a city amongst us. And that's what I've been doing broadly. Um, Diet, I have found, has become a very large part of the well-being of an animal, because I think it is the one that we have most under our control. Things like environmental changes, pollution, ozone, UV rays, too much of sunlight, some of these things that cause problems, pollution, are a bit out of our control as individuals. But to be able to provide the right lifestyle and the right diet for our dogs is very much the low hanging fruit that most of us can work on. And so the focus on diet, I think, makes it much easier for us to do, to do better for our dog's longevity overall. That being said, it's not the only thing. I mean, just because you feed your dog right doesn't mean your dog becomes immortal. It is a total concept, not just diet. Okay, so now, without much ado, I will move on to uh, presenting what I want to. Can all of you see my screen? Okay, Sagar, can everybody
Yes,
see?
yes, we can see it.
Lovely. So I'm here to present raw feeding as a diet option for pet dogs in India. I would want to include cats as well, because I've been doing this for quite some time. Um, Generally, when I started this long time back, and I would bring my dogs out into public spaces or into vet clinics for their vaccinations or for the general checkups, some of the things that I would hear from people around is, oh, what shiny coats they have, what an amazingly calm temperament, how well groomed they look. You must spend so much time on their maintenance. How do you manage so many dogs with your schedule? That's unthinkable. What white teeth they have. When did you go for the last dental scaling? And then there were people who would always say, share your secret. Okay. There were also other reactions. What do you feed your dogs? I also have a retriever, but his coat is not the same. Do you feed cooked food? Can you share the recipe, please? I would hear. And then I would also hear when I started talking about raw, this is those days, the first thing I was like, raw food? Are you kidding? Oh my God. Raw? Some people would be open to it. They say, okay, can you share? How does that even happen? How can they eat the bone? Raw was the question. And then they would say, my vet says that's dangerous. I'm sorry, any of the vets here, you probably identify with this, but this is how it is at this point of time. Raw food. Do you mean raw chicken? Is what I would hear. I'd like to try, but I don't know how. I'm told that it is dangerous, so I'm scared. So these were some of the common comments that I would hear, and over time I learned how to talk around this, and this is what I'm trying to share with all of you people as well, and hopefully open up some kind of a debate because some of these questions will be going through your minds as well. And then there are the non-believers. They might be seeing that the dog has a shiny coat, they might be seeing some really good things, but they will still say, I choose not to do raw because my dogs are also fine anyways. I don't see the need, so I don't do it. Raw feeding in India, oh no, that's unhealthy. I would never do raw. I cannot touch the meat. How do you do it? I was stressing about it, but some quote unquote experts told me it's fine. Now I choose not to do it. I don't even want to try right now. So I've had these kind of comments during my various consults, and so I've just kind of made a note of them. Um, to everybody who's having these kinds of thoughts, I always say that you work on your philosophy. Your philosophy is really basis the choices that you make, the educated choices that you make, and every choice that we make is ultimately our responsibility. But as humans, when we make choices for ourselves, we probably don't have to answer to anyone, or we have a conscience saying, hey, it's my choice, so I choose to do it and I'm okay with the consequence. But when you have an animal that is completely dependent on you, it's not free ranging, it's not choosing its own food like some of our community dogs might, some of our free ranging dogs and cats might, then making an educated life for educated choice for the animals in our lives becomes very, very key, because everything's in your hands. They can't do anything on their own. So whatever comes of their life, whether it's a medical thing or a genetic thing or whatever, every single choice that you're making for him is going to define his existence or his well-being. So I've learned to create my vision in I educate, but you make the choice. I'm here to provide you with the information. I made that choice. And my journey, which I will share with you over the next few slides, has been because I made that choice. And now that I've made the choice and I've worked with so many different dogs in my life, as well as over, I think the last number that I had was 372. So I've worked with 372 unique dogs on transitioning them through various medical problems and genetic problems, which are diet related. And I've transitioned them into raw, and I have data now. I literally have data chronicles around it. So I choose to now educate and share the information that I have, which is not really officially available in most of our places. But I choose to educate, but you have to make that choice. So I think I wanted to start with that thought process. What is an educated choice? Scientific and well researched guidance, localized experience, knowledge sharing, and as Sagar was saying, keep an open mind. Don't get shut down, don't get scared. read the data, go through the data, ask the questions, and then try and trust the process and go through it, because experience and the actual science and the research really count when you want to make a change. Change is very, very important in the current state of well-being that our urban animals that are living with us in cities need. So I think this is what is the appeal before I kickstart off. Now, let's start with a few facts. Natural food equals natural health. So, if you look at us as humans, we try our best as humans in our diet. Tell me how many. There are people who do that as well. There's a lot of supplements that they take, but most people on a day to day basis will aim at having the right kind of food. Or you'll see doctors telling you, have beans, have some dal, have a balanced meal on your plate, because natural food equals natural health, and that is what will bring your strong immune system, not supplementation, not separate things, tablets and capsules. So that is one of the, it's a fact. Natural health is equal to natural food, and if you're doing it right, you have a strong immune system, you don't need to do additional stuff. The best diet is what suits your pet's physiology and what their digestive system is built to consume. That's a fact. So, if you go by what your dog would have had if he were living naturally, that best ancestrally, that is what is ideally the best for their guts. So, these are two facts. And please keep your thoughts and your questions on notes or on the chat so that we can talk about it further. More facts. For us, it is a journey. Know what you're feeding your dog. Understand the fine prints on the labels of the dog food: dry, wet, home cooked, anything that you're buying ready made. Try and look for those labels and see what is it that those people are saying that they're giving you. And I think a lot of you already know this if you have done that transition into raw eventually. And then the journey also consists of the fine prints on the labels of the dog food. And when you read up, you will also look at books like The Consumer's Guide to Dog Food, which is what I went through. And then the AFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, and their handbook. And nowadays you have Dogs Naturally, Rodney Habib and Dr. Karen Becker, who've been putting a lot of information out. Before, it wasn't there. So I used to have to go back to the scratch and try and read those kind of things. But now you have a lot more information out there. Um, Now, the journey over here is, if you look at all those things and you read all those blogs and vlogs, you will realize that all of them will say look for meat as the main ingredient for your dog. Then they'll talk about ensure the quality of the meat. And this I'm talking about processed. Even there, they'll say let the first four ingredients be good quality or not byproducts, because that is what will define what is a so called good quality processed food. So ensure that the quality of the meat is good and it should not be enhanced. Check that the food label does not contain byproducts. And then check that the premium food is grain free, is what you'll see happen. This is what I saw close to 18 years back when I started reading the labels of the dog foods that I was giving my dogs. Okay. And then I realized that meat is the staple. Everywhere they're talking about ensuring meat, even though they're having so many different mixes in the food that they were processing, but meat was the staple. And then, if meat is what is best for my dogs, then why not source it in its purest form? That is straight from the butchers. It has, because it has what I want. I can get it fresh, as well as to the best quality that I would want, which is human grade and not pet grade. Now, I'm assuming the audience is a little more than just people who are basic. So when I say pet grade, we know that you have meat shops that, they say, I think it's called janta meat, and then it's called pet feast. I think some of them call it pet feast, which basically means they refuse, once they've taken on the human grade stuff and sold it to the humans, some of the fats and some of the skin bits, and those are the ones that they sell as pet feast, a lot of bones. And that is not what I'm talking about when I talk about the right balanced diet. So this is something that I figured over time. And then as I moved from processed food and then I came from cooked and then to raw. So when I came into cooked, I realized that the first thing that we end up doing with our meat is heat treatment. So when you're pressure cooking, um, have any of you even thought about what that kind of heat at 110 or 120 degrees, which is what happens when you pressure cook, what it does to the protein that in that chicken or that mutton meat that you do? Most protein, the scientific, the peer review papers say that protein, when it is cooked at that higher temperature, if you have 100 gram of protein, it turns to about 40 gram of protein. Moisture goes away. The myoglobin and the plasma, the blood, all of which has nutrients in it, they break down completely. And what you have left is some amount of protein, of course, but not the same quantity. Vitamins and minerals are far more heat sensitive. And if they're that heat sensitive, then they literally break down and they're just flavor. There's really nothing that you're giving when you're giving your dog a cooked boiled liver or a heart piece or something. There's really not a lot if it has gone through the pressure cooker. So, again, you've lost on nutrients, but yes, you've gained on some flavor. Now, if meat is what is best for my dogs, then like I said, I went human grade and not pet grade, and then I bought it fresh cut. And then when I started trying to give it raw, I realized that I was giving the meat in its purest form. The proteins were exactly like I would read in a nutrient profile on the internet. So if it said that heart has taurine, more amount of taurine, it actually would. There would be plus minus percentage differences because obviously it would depend upon where the which animal it's been brought from, sourced from. Was that animal actually grass fed? Was he moving around? Was he a fit animal, young animal, old animal? So yes, there will be some amount of difference, but still you are able to look up a nutrient profile and say, hey, plus minus 4 5%, this is what the organ or the protein will be rich in. And I then can go more specifically, more pointedly to work towards the better nutrition for my dog, whatever my dog needs. So as I moved in that journey from cooked to raw, I realized one of the most important things that I got worried about was, is the raw meat fresh? And then there were people who would say in India, meat is very unhygienic, livestock are not fed properly. Chemical pollutants, so injections, hormonal injections, those kind of things. And then you would have salmonella and E. coli, which a lot of people talk about. They talk about bacteria saying, hey, raw meat has all of this. So I'm putting in all the misgivings that I had at that point of time, and I'm assuming some of you do as well. And then, and then there was a part about bones. How will my dogs tackle them? What if they get stuck and choke on bones? All these, I remember 18 years back, did not have anyone to help me with this. So I would have to do a lot more research, read up a lot more, and then try and figure out how to do this right for my dogs. And therefore, I ended up getting the answers that I would share with you now. India. We seem to think that meat in India is actually bad, but I would say meat in India, we have a huge advantage because we are predominantly an agrarian country, and our animals, especially in the villages, and if you source it right, as opposed to countries abroad where you're predominantly, the human beings are also on a lot of meat based diets, and so the farming of the cattle ranches, the sheep ranches are far higher than here. Here, there's a lot more chicken, but there's a lot less mutton. And then you move on to beef, it'll be a lot lesser. So the cows and buffaloes over here are actually grass fed, and they really, really do well with regards to organic diets. And therefore, their meat is actually a lot better. But yes, you'll have to look for those sources when you're choosing to do raw. And as you look for those sources, you'll find that you'll find quite a few sources if you get with your butchers right. So grass fed is real over here. You can go to source and agree to work offline with butchers and buy slaughter fresh. Unlike abroad, where everything is done somewhere in a farm, but when it comes to the city, it's actually coming to one of the supermarkets through the cold chain, supply chain. It's come in, it's already freeze dried, or it's already packed, and we don't know when it got slaughtered and how it moved across. And then you see it in the super. And one of the reasons why raw feeding gained such a bad name abroad was because of the way all of this was getting done. But those where I used to stay in the UK, we actually had access to country fresh ranches and farmers, and they would provide us with meat and beef directly, and that would be fantastic. Here we have far better sources like that. If you look at, most of our cities do have butcher shops, and we still can go direct to the source and buy slaughter fresh. So that's an advantage that we have in India. And then of course, when you do bulk buys over here, you can choose to get into good amounts of discounts price wise, whereas when you go to a supermarket abroad or something, you would not really be able to negotiate much on prices. And I think that's a disadvantage as well for us. Then why else now? More from a logistical perspective. Easy to serve. You don't have to do a very elaborate meal. I mean, I'm just talking about what was in it for me when I started doing it. Easy to serve. All you had to do is ensure that it was crunchy, soft, not completely thawed, because we do live in a tropical country. Abroad, the countries are colder climes, so meat remains cold for longer and therefore does not hold a lot of bacteria. But here we need to ensure that we give it cold, or semi frozen, and then it's perfect. So easy to serve, nutrient rich, we already talked about this. And because it's nutrient rich, the satiation from nutrition, and this is not just about filling the stomach with food, this is about the satiation in terms of malnourishment turning into nourishment, is higher with raw meat because they're not heat treated, and therefore the frequency of feeding can get lower. So it's very easy to do a one meal a day with a dog that is raw fed, because you can give that meal once a day and that will be perfectly fine, exactly like they would if they were free ranging out there in the wild by themselves. My pet dogs, they love their raw food, and this has been right from the beginning, because gut wise, touch wood, I had good dogs. But over a period of time, we've had to transition dogs who did not have good guts for various reasons. And as we moved the transition, so the transition is key, how you slowly and steadily acclimatize their gut to coming back to raw, depending on what they were having before, is important. But I have not to date seen a dog that hasn't taken to raw if one has understood what is the problem with their gut and slowly and steadily transitioned towards it. So, yes, most of them do enjoy their raw food once they slowly and steadily build their guts to the right capability. So even for humans, if you were to have sandwiches and burgers and suddenly one day decide to have a salad or a fruit juice, you'll suddenly find yourself feeling uncomfortable, because your gut would be working a certain way, and your gut bacteria, your gut pH, everything would be off. And at that point of time, you'll feel uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that it's not the right food for you. So this is something that I felt that is very important for you guys to know. Of course, once you start giving food in its most natural form, immune systems get better. The dog's immunity is really, really good. You will see lesser ticks on their body. You will see much lesser, ailments, gut related ailments, skin related ailments. Everything is a lot better. Shiny, healthy, tangle free, lesser shedding coats. So, my dogs over the last 18 years, I know people who bathe their dogs weekly. There are some who bathe their dogs once in 15 days. I bathe my dogs once in 3 months, and they still have shiny leisure shedding coats. Yes, I do brush them because they're going all over the place, rolling around, walking around. But brushing is all I have to do, and they're odor free. They're beautiful, and they love their baths because they're not getting bathed and showered and groomed every other day. because that is an unpleasant experience behaviorally for these dogs. So yes, much less pain. When I say pain, much less irritation from using the wrong kind of bathing tools or grooming tools for them. Pearly white teeth, healthy gums, and odorless breath. My dog is 18-year-old now. His jaw strength has come down. His teeth have browned up a lot because he is now 18, but he still eats raw. He is still able to crunch down on his bones and meat. I sometimes have to crack a couple of them for him because if it's really hard, he can't handle it anymore. But then he's 18 going on 19. Tell me how many of your dogs manage to do that with with the normal cooked food that you do. So jaw strength, teeth strength, gum strength, gum and teeth-based diseases, the periodontal diseases, gingivitis, tartar, none of that. It's much more delayed if you're giving your dog the right diet because they're using their teeth, gums, and jaws the way it's meant to be used, and therefore much healthier. Calmer and way less hyperactive and destructive. Those of you that work on behavior will know that chewing releases endorphins that will negate the activity of stress hormones within the body and will calm a dog down. So a lot of people say my dog is more aggressive because it could get more aggressive if they're given raw. Actually, that's a complete myth. The dog is aggressive if he's malnourished and he suddenly feels instinctively that I am getting a higher quantity of protein. So you will see dogs with kibble also getting food aggressive. Dogs that are getting a vegetarian diet will get food aggressive because they want more in order to sate their nourishment. And these dogs, who once you give them what they have, the right quantities, over a period of time, they're actually calm and they don't care about if someone comes and picks a meat from their plate. Also, they're not so bothered because they're sated. They don't feel the need to instinctively protect their food like you would in the wild. Better interactiveness, alertness, and bonding because they're getting the right nutrients, so they're feeling fitter, their muscles are working well. More confident dogs are calmer dogs. Easier to keep at the right weight and right muscle tone. Like I said, nutrient profiles are so much more close to reality because we're not processing these foods, whether it's by heat or whether it's by machine or whatever. You're not diluting the nutrients, and as a result it's much easier to measure and give the right quantities to our dogs. And therefore you'll find that over a period of time, as the dog gets to the right proportion for his ideal weight, you'll find that on a day that he's more active you can give him 50 grams more and nothing will happen to him. On a day he's less active, you can give him 50 grams less and he'll be fine. You can manage weight just that way. um, Compact and smaller poop. Poop is basically waste matter that the dog has not been able to process and use for his body. So you'll find that dogs eating the wrong kind of diet will have voluminous amount of poop coming out, soft, semi-solid, pasty, because the body has not been able to absorb the right amount of the right amount of nutrients out of it. It has not been able to process that food in its gut. But when you do raw, and you do it right, you will find that the poop is compact, and the dog is probably eliminating once or max twice a day. um, no need for chemical dewormers. So chemical dewormers is not needed at all because the gut acidity is so high that most of the bacteria or most of the pathogens that survive on a higher, more alkaline gut will not be able to survive. And if they're not able to survive, you broadly have the right gut biome for that is optimal for that particular dog's gut. And I've not had to do dewormers for my dogs for years on end. I've tested to see fecal things to see whether worms have worked. And not just me, but multiple clients of mine who've been on raw and who've had worms in their dog's food worms in their stools for a while. We've gone into raw and then actually gotten all of that done, and it hasn't happened because the right acidity of the gut will kill most of those bacteria. Also remember, when you're doing dewormers, dewormers are, the equivalent of Harpic, that you would do in your bathroom toilet cleaner. So just imagine the pathogens that are there in your WC. When you put Harpic, everything goes away, good, bad, ugly. So the same thing will end up happening with your dog's gut. When you put a dewormer, you are completely cleansing out the gut. Good bacteria also gets impacted. Everything flushes out. So you have to start all over again. It's like seasoning a cooking pan and then scrubbing it from of everything and starting from scratch again. So do dewormers. In our case, we do dewormers only if required, and it's very rarely required for a raw dog, a raw fed dog. Cleaner anal sacs. So if the poop is a little on the more compact and harder side, it does manage to aspirate on the anal sacs on a regular basis. So working on the anal sacs manually, which is unnatural, actually is not required for a raw fed dog. Not to that extent, not to the extent that it would if you were doing softer cooked food for dogs. uh, Species appropriate. So when I say species appropriate, a lot of us think that we are talking wolves because dogs are supposedly wolves. A lot of wolf studies is what people say, that no, no, wolves are carnivorous, but our dogs are omnivorous. I want to talk about this now. Our dogs have moved away from the wolf species. So wolves were Canis lupus. We are now Canis lupus familiaris, which is a whole different species which has happened once dogs got domesticated. Now, when I say domesticated, what is the natural habitat of a dog that came and started living around human habitation, say about 12, 13,000 years ago? They were meant to be free ranging, but living on the periphery of human habitation. Okay, so they would still hunt, but they would also scavenge. And over a period of time, as they made this place their territory, they would alert human beings of intruders or wild animals that were coming from the periphery of the space, the wild that they were in. And that humans found was symbiotic because they would get warned, they could take care of the things. So they chose to start sharing their food with dogs over a period of time so that they could stay around more. They did not go away to hunt, they stayed around more. And that is how symbiotically dogs started living around humans. Remember, humans also used to live on the peripheries of jungles and they were hunting for food, meat alongside the foraging that they would do for fruits and vegetables. And then slowly and steadily, we started becoming agricultural. And as we started becoming agricultural, our food changed because we started growing crops, we started growing grains, and we started cooking those kinds of things. We started getting lazier. We wouldn't go into the forest to forage or hunt. We would just eat off the land. And when that happened, it obviously started changing the diet of the dogs. The free ranging dogs would still come, scavenge, take a small meal from us, and then go out and continue to hunt. So they would get their birds and squirrels and hares and the little deer and the pigs. They would go in packs and they would hunt, get their proteins out of there, and still come and scavenge. So over a period of time, evolution did happen over 12,000 years. The gut biome shifted to an extent that the pH values moved from pure carnivorous to be able to absorb about 10 to 15% of some of the stuff that we were giving them because they were getting it on a consistent basis. So, yes, evolution happened, but in 12,000 years, they managed to do about 10 to 15% absorption. And that's what the studies say. So if you give 100 grams of rice and veggies, about 15 grams gets things. So they'll not die because of that. They'll not starve because now they can absorb that much. But remember that most plant based items are coated by this really hard protein called cellulose. And cellulose requires an enzyme called cellulase to break it down. None of our carnivorous animals have that cellulase or that enzyme to break it down. So they would go after grass fed animals that do manage to, through the flagellate bacteria in their stomach, or the ruminant stomachs that they had, they would have the bacteria that could break down cellulose. They would also release some amount of enzymes of cellulase. So when our dogs would hunt those grass fed animals, they would end up eating whatever was getting absorbed. So the derivative form of broken down cellulase, which is now moved into the animal's muscle and is providing it, or tripe into its stomach, is something that they would go after, and half digested is something that they would be able to take because it's broken down. And that is how they got their nutrition around their greens. But mostly, this is how it was. And then, as they started living around us, we started keeping them in our homes. And now we didn't let them wander wild. We started sharing our food more. And around the 1920s, we had the Great Depression. And in the Great Depression, most of the food that was being made, most humans started having that because there was a shortage. And that is when we had dry dog food come into the world. And I think it started in the UK, European, US countries first. I think it was there first. And then dry dog food became the rage because it became easy to just buy off the shelf from somewhere and then hand it to our dogs. And that is how dry dog food came into our lives. Otherwise it was all natural in the past. The dog's anatomy and physiology itself um, is, if you were to look at the dog's structure, the eyes are forward faced so that they can focus on their prey more easily. Their nose has a really really strong scent, so if there's a really strong scent, they can track their prey much easier in order to hunt down. Teeth. I've tried to put a picture of teeth. You have the exact teeth. Even now, despite all the evolution, the teeth, the canines, the incisors, the premolars, the molars, everything that the dog has in his mouth from a teeth perspective is built for crunching, breaking, and tearing. It's not meant for chewing the cud or grinding things down. So we keep talking about our dogs needing to chew. Dogs don't chew. Dogs actually, if you actually watch the natural way, I hear you, puppy. I'm sorry, my dog is, I think he's hearing dog far too many times and is trying to get my attention. But yeah, so the teeth of the dog are the kind that can crunch, break, and swallow chunks of meat and bone. They're not meant to chew and grind things up. You'll see herbivores will have a lot of those grinding teeth because greens, vegetables require that much amount of chewing in order to break down to any extent. Um, so yes, dentition completely supports non-vegetarian food for these animal proteins. Stomachs and intestines. The dog's stomach is supposed to have a much higher. So if you see cats, they're obligate carnivores. The larger felines completely cannot have anything vegetarian. Their gut pH is really really low, which means it's acidic. It melts down the thing. Our cats, the smaller cats in our lives, are also obligate carnivores. They also struggle, although they can do, again, they've evolved. They can do with some wheat grass and this and that. You'll see them forage around if you really try one odd time, but it never lasts in their stomach for too long. Um, our dogs can handle some amount of greens, but their gut pH is supposed to be somewhere optimally between 6 and 6.5, which is still on the more acidic side. Okay. If it goes to 7, 7.5, it becomes more alkaline. And when it's more alkaline, it is unable to dissolve things much. It starts working towards fermentation, and that's when you start seeing digestion problems. So the more amount of veggie matter that you give your dog, say you're putting more amount of vegetables and grains in your dog's diet, over a period of time, those being plant matter will start turning the gut to be a little more alkaline. And because processing is taking time, because they don't have the right enzymes to break it, it sits in the stomach for too long, or it comes out as undigested poop. Sorry, my dog is disturbed. Just 1 second, I'll let him out. Sorry. So yes, it does end up causing gut issues, and then you'll see fussiness in food. You'll see a lot more flatulence, gas, all of that, and it does end up causing digestive issues. And you think that your dog is fussy with food, but fussiness with food happens because there is discomfort in the stomach, and therefore, even when you have a stomach upset, you don't feel like eating. But we tend to think our dogs are fussy, and then we start giving them more of the same kind of food. We try hand feeding them, we try force feeding them, all of which is really bad for them. Their instincts are telling them not to eat it, but we are choosing to push that food down their mouths, which is not right. Um, Minimal enzymes to break down plant proteins. We talked about it. We don't. Dogs do not have the cellulase in their guts to do that. Uh, the dog's anatomy and physiology, very limited carbohydrate digestion. So, if an animal were to be wild out there and sourcing its food by itself, dogs predominantly hunt. So, when they hunt in packs, they bring down an animal, they consume it then and there. And then if they are sitting around, probably a fruit will fall off a tree, a mango will fall off the tree once in a while because a squirrel messed with it or a monkey messed with it and a fruit fell down, it's splattered, and then they would mess around with it and get a little bit of sugar in their system. They don't get eggs so easily because eggs in the wild do not come out of chickens, and chickens are not really found in the wild as much. So they don't lay eggs on the ground, they're up on the trees. So when they're up on the trees, the only time the dog, because the dog can't really climb trees, cats can, but the dog can't. So what ends up happening is only when a nest falls to the ground and the egg actually breaks open and then it's all over splattered on the ground, can they lick at it and get something out of it. But mostly they won't get access to it. Um, Grains, no question. Vegetables, not so much, because it's not in the wild, it's all berries, herbs, and grasses. And yes, they use that to self-soothe quite a bit, and we'll talk about self-soothing soon. Some of you seem to have done some research on it. Sagar, is CK there on this call, on this
No, CK is not there. I think his the food scientist is here, so
Oh,
we'll get her
fantastic.
to ask questions later.
Okay, fantastic. So that, and then so very limited carbohydrate digestion because most plant matter contains the carbohydrates and sugars. Um, our dogs actually get their carbohydrates from glycogen, not glucose. They get it from that, which is breaking down proteins itself, which gets broken down by a specific system and turns into glycogen, which is an equivalent of a sugar for them and which provides them with whatever they need for their brain function, etc. So Dev Jyoti, you're asking me to repeat this again. Are you talking about the carbohydrate digestion? Okay, okay. So yes, carbohydrate digestion for our animals, for our dogs, they are not meant when they're out in the wild to actually have carbohydrates directly, no direct sugars, because it's not easily available to them in the kind of lifestyle that they're supposed to live, which is hunting. Okay. Now, over a period of time, they can digest, like I said, about 10 to 15%, but they don't need it at all because when they have high concentrated proteins, their liver releases the kind of enzymes that will turn those proteins into glycogen, which is also a type of carbohydrate. It's a type of sugar, which then is what they use, unlike plants, which have different complex sugars or fructose or a different type of sugar, which these guys can't process. That is what carbohydrate digestion is, and it's very limited for them. Pancreatic enzymes. They only trypsin and chymotrypsin. They do not have other things which can break down plant-based matter unless the cellulose is broken. Um, Mostly plant-based matter is used for fiber. So when a dog feels uncomfortable in his stomach due to too much of acidity, a lot of people would notice that your dog starts eating grass and then vomits it out. That's because the grasses are plant matter, which is a little alkaline, and probably the gut has released a lot of bile acid, which is irritating the stomach because he's not eaten on time or whatever. And now he needs to eat that grass to make it a little more alkaline and bring out the bile. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why you'll see that dogs self soothe by using plants and plant matter, not for digestion, not as a staple in their diet. um, when you do too much of plant matter sits in their system because the body is unable to digest it as fast. It'll either pass right through the system and cause loosies, or that's when most nutritionists, or the science that people have figured out, is give them a little more fiber, so the fiber kind of holds that food in place in the stomach for a while, so that it can ferment a little more and maybe the dog can make more use of it. That's the science behind giving good fiber. But when you're giving the right amount of meat in the diet, that's not needed because the enzymes itself will break the meat, melt the meat down. The bones will get broken down, but bones take a little longer. So that's what will keep the animal sated. So if you have the right percentage of bone, meat, and organ, mostly your dog will have a fantastic, well balanced diet that remains in his stomach, gets utilized, and then releases compact poop. Um, we talked about discomfort, we talked about loosies, we talked about obesity. Obesity happens when you're giving too much of carbs and the system does not know what to do with it, it just stores it. It happens with us also. The same thing that will happen when you're doing too much of carbs in a dog's diet. Lower metabolism, if food is sitting in the stomach and getting fermented, it's sitting around, and so the metabolism gets slow. And if the metabolism gets slow, the dog will end up becoming more obese. It's the same as us, so the same concept except with a different type of food. Fussiness with food, malabsorption, stress due to all of that. um, I've already explained it, I've just put it down here. And then the more important thing, half digested feces and coprophagia. So when a food is half digested, um, and the dog is malnourished, you mostly will see him trying to eat his food back. Okay, because he feels the need. He's malnourished, he needs to eat it. So you'll see a lot of stray dogs trying to eat poop. They will eat cow dung, they will eat poop, they will do all of that because it's all half digested food that if they have again, they're hoping to process it some more. And that results to some extent in coprophagia. The minute you start sorting the diet right, you will find coprophagia goes away unless it has become a behavioral habit over time. Okay, so coprophagia. Um, Lowered immunity and cancers. So cancer is not really a disease. It is actually a compromised immune system that is allowing anomalous cells to continue to grow and multiply in the body. So every time a dog is stressed and the immune system goes down, you will find some form of cancer that eventually forms, unless it's genetic, of course. But even if it's genetic, you can, and I've done this literally with my first dog, Caesar, who's all over my Facebook. He was a breeder reject because his grandfather had died of cancer, a brain tumor, and multiple tumors on his body when he was 2 years old. And this guy had the same body structure and the same the same defects, and so he was going to get euthanized at 6 months. He was showing the same defects, and so they were pretty sure that this guy is having all the genetics, and so they were going to euthanize, being ethical breeders. I chose to take that dog on, and he lived on to be 12 years old, and he finally got that brain tumor, by the way, but at 12 years of age, not at 2 years of age. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I want to say that if you can work on the immune system, you can hold off the cancer for some more time. And a dog, his grandfather went at 2 years of age due to lower immunity, probably. And that may not just be diet, it could be stress, it could be the lifestyle. Maybe he was living in a cage because he was a breeder dog. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's a combination of things. But lowered immunity brought the cancer on faster. But my boy had a full life. He lived on to be 12, which is the lifespan of some very healthy dogs that are on that are living in our urban environments. So yeah, lowered immunity and cancers are have a direct correlation. um, Carbs and sugars, cancer cells feed off them. So we always say that when a dog has cancer, if you want to bring it into remission, you want to work towards low sugar, low or no sugar, so that it does not, the cancer cells can't feed off it. So carb, sugar and cancer have a direct correlation. So if you're doing cooked food and grain food and your dog has that immune system compromise, you will end up adding to it. Aging, when you have a dog that's more obese or that's got a gut problem, it will directly impact his or her age. The faster aging, the more unhealthy you are, the faster you age. And that's what I'm meaning to say. So my 18-year-old dog is going on 19. If he lasts till May, I count every single day. I'm celebrating every single day that he's alive now. But he still walks around. He has a crabby walk now because he's got arthritis from sitting in his cage for 8 years. He's a laboratory released dog. But he still walks, and he's 18 and a half, and he walks on his own. He's got arthritis, he's got spondylosis, but he still walks. My 14-year-old, who's the other beagle, his sibling, and he moves around like a 5-year-old dog. He still deals with puppies, and he's super active. So aging actually can get, you can prevent aging, or you can decelerate aging if you give the right kind of food and you keep the gut working to the optimal, because nutrients are coming that are right. The dog's instincts are great. The dog is not creating gingivitis and tooth bacteria, which will eventually impact heart, enlargement of heart, and all happens because of bad oral hygiene. And if the heart works fine, then it's good. So all of these things are what cause aging in dogs. With the right diet, you can sort it out to an extent. Supplementation. Every time we do cooked food or kibble, we are ending up supplementing alongside. So the kibble itself has a proportion which is done through R&D, and then you will give a treat, and then somebody will say do golden paste, somebody will say do I've had nutritionists who give ghee to their dogs. There are those that put in greens separately. I see some very colorful recipes that come out. Each of those things is another added set of supplements which should have been micronutrients. And every time you mix and create that elaborate recipe, you are messing with the proportion of macro versus micronutrients for your dog's diet, which will eventually impact the overall longevity of the dog or his health in the long run. Because just as vitamin deficiency is a problem, hypervitaminosis is a big problem as well. So every time we try to do something very elaborate, and sometimes we are overcooking it, sometimes we are undercooking. There's no standard to this. Nobody's really telling you cook it for three and a half minutes at 100 degrees. Nobody's telling you that. They're just saying do a pressure cooker. Even pressure cookers behave differently. A smaller pressure cooker, bigger pressure cooker, it'll do things differently. So every time you're doing something and you're trying to make an elaborate recipe, you are messing with the balance of supplements for your dog, which has long term impacts which you'll never really be able to figure out because you're doing something so warped over a period of time. And then I was coming back to what I call zoo pharmacognosy. Dogs that are eating naturally have a much deeper instinct because they really know what they want from their diet, and they're getting it exactly as they want. So when they feel sated, I've put platters of different kinds of food for my dogs, and I see them one day choose something first and then choose something else. Like they might go for the organs on one day. Organs contain a lot more of B vitamins and minerals. Proteins and sodium, magnesium, potassium, those kind of things are there in meats. In the muscle meat, the heart has more amount of taurine. The bones have more amount of calcium and phosphorus, and you literally see dogs pick and choose depending on what is going on in their body at in a phase of time. There are dogs that actually avoid certain things on days, and you allow them to, because whatever it is that their instinct is telling them, their instincts are deep enough that they choose, and that is fantastic. Okay. When you allow them to pick and choose, you will find that dogs themselves on their walks, they're going to go after specific herbs. And this was my experiment with the Central Park. So the Central Park is a sensory garden where we have put in herbs that dogs go after, which has come from my studies over the last 18 years. We've put in herbs that are actually growing in the wild. They're not processed and dehydrated and concentrated, and we're putting in half a teaspoon on top of their food. So if they have to have their meat, that is going in anyways. No, I'm allowing them to forage, and you'll find them go after something specific. And if I identify that herb and go back to see what its medicinal properties are, I can for sure say that maybe my dog was feeling a little uncomfortable. Maybe the liver values are mildly elevated, and that's why he chose to go after that. So, self soothing is very real in an animal whose instincts are deep enough, and it causes and they do it themselves. So in the wild, you will see animals do a lot more self-soothing because they're choosing to do things on their own, and they're not vomiting after they're having those herbs. They'll go after the tip of a leaf, they'll roll it around in their mouth, and then they'll spit it out. So it's basically the juice that they're going after. They're not really chewing on it like a goat would. Even if they're chewing on it, they're eventually spitting it off. They're chewing it mainly because they want that juice in. So self-soothing, it's a science now, zoopharmacognosy, something that I've been experimenting with. I won't call myself an expert, but I definitely have been going after it with a vengeance. And now I say that raw diet also should, over a period of time, the more senior your dogs get, the more you should allow them to supplement and self-soothe with a few amount of herbs here and there, a couple of berries, which have antioxidants. They choose it themselves. Okay. Similarly, aromatherapy, the right kind of smells of certain flowers they use for de-stressing themselves or to make themselves feel a little more sleepy. So zoopharmacognosy is very real. Okay, and it is proven now. The more we study canine ethology, we find that dogs do it. uh, so where am I? I'm sorry. Yes. um so I've talked quite a bit now, and so now I say, instead of saying why raw, I now put the question out to you, why not raw? If so much of detail is available, scientifically proven, and multiple dog data coming across, why not raw? Because the food that you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine, or it can be the slowest form of poison. So it'll not kill your dog straight away, but you're definitely doing something that's bringing down the longevity of your dog if you're doing it wrong. And remember, he doesn't have the choice. You hold the choice in your hands. Um, is what I wanted to say before I opened up for Q&A. I hope it made sense. There's so much I can keep talking, but I thought that Q&A would give more direction to people's questions.
Yes, thank you, Devisri. This was very intense. Okay, I was stuck to my
Okay.
screen.
Oh,
Um,
believe me, it is intense because this is 19 years of my journey. You have no idea, Sagar, when I did not have anybody to answer questions for me. This is exactly how I had to do this reading myself, and then I would sit and bite my teeth saying, am I doing wrong to my dog? But then I would go ahead and try and do it, and then I would be amazed at the response. And this is the reason I'm able to share this level of detail now today.